Hello everyone, hope you all are fine. Today I would be talking about the Conceptor program because a lot of students had asked about what this program would be, and they had a lot of queries regarding what would be exactly the nature of coverage and how different that is from probably the you can say the crash course or what we used to do, the quality enrichment or quality revision program. Right? Obviously the nature of the program will not be very drastically altered, rather it will be improved upon the existing program. Fine, and the important aspect would be that somewhere we all learn from our errors. So we have also improved upon the mode of delivery and probably the nature of the I would say analysis and nature of the content dissemination, the way it will be provided, the way it will be tackled in the classroom, conceiving of the nature of the exam which is coming. Right? Obviously the trend is quite clear. The scoring is not very high, majority of the optionals, and somewhere it is wise enough not to over-invest our time in the optional as well also, not to think of getting those 350, 300 something. We obviously aspire to do that, right? We don't deny, and definitely that is achievable, but what I'm trying to say is that okay, we need to have a balanced approach to every paper in the examination and not just get too obsessed with the optional. But there will be definitely a mix or fine balance of the extra effort that we put for the optional and somewhere the kind of marks that we create out of that. Right? So knowing the optional, reading the optional, and then somewhere knowing the facts of the optional and solving the previous year question paper, they all have their own benefit. But the most important aspect would be that somewhere understanding or I would say predicting the kind of questions that can be asked. Obviously reading a topic at length in detail will require a lot of time, and probably whether that topic is relevant for us or not, because like many students have come time and again to us and said, sir, ye topic humne bahut nahi kiya, this we did not do in detail, this we did not do much. But I would always say that okay, fine, the exam is more about a competitive edge. The exam is not about knowing all and being all, right? It's not the end of everything, just mugging up the syllabus. Right, so let us see. This is for the mains. And obviously for those people who have studied, who are giving mains, and obviously it can also be for those people who have studied already and they probably want to somewhere hone up their content. Right. So two things will define this program. One would be the scope of coverage, right? The scope of coverage of the syllabus, that is important. We have already given a schedule. Already it is there with you. On the website you can go and find out. Right? It will be almost 1.5 months roughly. Would be over almost a month before your exam. You'll have enough time to again re-revise it and come with all the doubts that you have. One is scope of coverage, right? The other would be, right? This would be the nature of content. And I'll try to explain both of them, and that is where fundamentally the program is different from whatever programs that were running or that would be running somewhere in the market, right? So we intend to first focus on the scope of coverage. Obviously the scope of coverage somewhere pertains to your more than 70% almost of whatever you say is the syllabus, whatever you read is the syllabus. Probably more than that, but I would say strictly somewhere 70%, okay, which itself is important, right? To the extent of around 90% in the UPSC. Right? So this is technically important to the extent of 90% in the UPSC, though technically it covers here 70% of the syllabus. So that will be covered. Right. Now see how. Let's take an example for this one, because this video is going to be very brief, right? The details of the program, the structure, the timeline, duration, fee, and all that you can obviously go and see the website. So 90% this. Now let me just explain to you what this idea is. So scope of coverage would mean, let's say for example, right, we are talking about Wilson, or we are talking about dichotomy. Now obviously we study a lot of things about dichotomy. We may also study, what were Wilson's favorite menu, favorite food, right? Many people might study that also, and many people may be interested in obviously knowing what kind of person Wilson was, right? But that is not our scope, right? So Wilson's dichotomy, let's say we talk about dichotomy, right, in general, and then we try to fit in Wilson into that dichotomy, right? But Wilson, or his idea or his conception of dichotomy, was not technically the ideal form of dichotomy. When he is reviewed in relation to Goodenough, then probably the nature of the dichotomy comes into full bloom, right? Then we know exactly what is this dichotomy about. Coupled with Wilson and Goodenough's analysis, or somewhere a comparative study of both of them, right? If we just add to the extent the contribution of Waldo, right, and White, L.D. White, who wrote the first textbook, 1926, Introduction to the Study of Public Administration, and Waldo's book, 1947, somewhere, The Administrative State, which was also a very profound book. And in fact, Waldo, the dominant idea of Waldo, the heterodoxy, which was in contradiction to the dichotomy. Now see, so when we are looking at dichotomy, we are not merely trying to state that there is politics and there is a sphere of administration, and both have to have somewhere a separate, existence, and these two are two separate realms of study or understanding. It is not so. Because later on, public policy approach, comparative public administration, e-governance, and so many other aspects come, and somewhere they try to blur this boundary, new public administration, right? They impact all this. But logically, when we are studying dichotomy, we cannot explain, we cannot describe, we cannot even understand or probably convey to the examiner the nature of dichotomy and what exactly was Wilson's and Goodenough's perception of that dichotomy, specifically when we talk about the American public administration, the study of or Americanized study of public administration dominated by those academicians, those scholars, unless we put into perspective these two. Now this was just to give you an example that what exactly would be the scope, right? I'm coming to that. Okay, many people will say that, okay, paper 2 now, what's the scope, right? Let's come to that aspect also. Let me erase this part. Right? So let us say fine. So let us come back. Now if I say that when we go to, let's say, paper 2 now, and many of the students obviously are very conscious about some trivial topics like police reforms, right, or ethics in governance, or for that matter local governance, PSU, now see how the nature of coverage, nature of content obviously will change, but scope of coverage, how does this form? Let's say we talk about the center-state relation, right? I'm coming to that. How we are going to shape this entire content. So we talk about, let's say, for example, center-state relations. Now there is a topic already which is provided in your syllabus. Okay, we can go green, maybe. Let's see if it works or not. Right? So nature of, now there is a topic which says visible? Is it visible? Intergovernmental relation. I hope it is visible. Let's use a different color. Okay. Right? I use intergovernmental relations. Now the problem is, why paper 2 becomes a problem, that many of the students, obviously they cannot visualize the broad spectrum of the topic. They do not understand the something known as concentric circle model. Concentric circle model means that one topic, one specific issue, when dealt with different dimensions, right, in different aspects, will overlap with another topic. That means one dimension or two dimension or three dimensions of the other topic would be actually the part of this topic which we are dealing with. Now this will help us in helping us probably in two ways. One, we understand the topic more comprehensively. We're able to integrate or interlink them. Second, we do not need to mug up or memorize it 2 times. We get 5-6 points or 10 points, probably 5 points from here, this topic, and 5 points from that topic. So we technically get 10 points, right? A reading almost half of both the topic. That means you need not read 2 topics twice. You need to read one topic once or half times and one topic half times. That actually makes 1. So your effort basically gets halved. That is the idea, right? But yes, most of the students or people generally think of a procedural approach to the study, right? So they want things to be more compartmentalized, right? But that is not how we are going to score marks. So you have intergovernmental relations. Now intergovernmental relations theoretically would help us understand the different types of relationships that exist at different levels of the government. Now when you say intergovernmental, that obviously means the federal, the regional, the local, or sub-local or sub-national, sub-regional level relationship, right? Now this national, regional and sub-regional or local level relationship is not linear, it is not straight. So if you have a National Human Rights Commission there, which you may call as not technically part of the government, but I would not say it is totally beyond the scope of the government, right? It may not be directly the executive, but it's like a quasi-judicial body, a regulatory mechanism. So NHRC, SHRC, and then if we talk about the lower level, now that is more of an independent institution and their interaction. But they are not totally isolated from their governments or their level of governments, right? So one type of interaction might be purely autonomous institution based. One type of interaction may be purely regulatory. One type of maybe interaction may be purely quasi-judicial type body, CAT, SAT, and likewise. CIC, SIC, and likewise. One may be purely ministerial and bureaucratic relationship. That means direct executive relationship, right? But direct executive relationship will involve again 2 levels: political relationship, Prime Minister, President, Council of Minister, Governor, Chief Minister, Council of Minister, then central administration and state administration, central bureaucracy, state bureaucracy. Now that will be a nature of relationship that certain changes as the scope of interaction will change, the nature of relationship will change. So when we talk about financial relationships, we see an overarching dominance of the central government. When we talk about administrative relationships, it may not be a dominance of the central government. When we talk about political relationship, also because we have a 7th schedule, we have classification of functions, we may not exactly see the dominance of the union. But when we talk about, let's say, the recent developments like GST Council 279A, okay, there we may see the dominance of the center in spite of the fact that it is a constitutional body. When we think of emergency, when we think of exceptional circumstances, the nature of relationship changes, right? When we see developmental aspects, if you talk about FRBM Act, right? Fiscal prudence. So when you think of the developmental process, when you think of decentralization of power or principle of subsidiarity, then the nature of relationship changes, because then we want to move away from the center to the local level. And there also the nature of relationship may be different with center and local and state and local relationship emerging as two parallel streams. When you talk about centrally sponsored schemes or central sector schemes or centrally sponsored schemes and the state developmental schemes, and there the local body and the state administration, then local body and the central administration interaction. That is quite obvious when you talk about development of highways, expressway, toll roads, land acquisition, and so many other issues. Right? Now see. So we study this, fine. Now we cannot treat this as independent from this relationship, because police or law and order is a very contentious, is a very debatable issue which is there between the center and the state. In fact, the debate is going on since the Poonchi Commission, the second ARC, and likewise, okay, Prakash Singh case, and recently obviously a lot of other changes, smart policing and CCTNS, e-governance and the impacts of e-governance, and likewise many things have come. So this change is not simple. We cannot just simply talk about police reform, 𝗕𝗫𝗀𝗃 Commission comes into picture, Napier talks about reforms, then we talk about the British constabulary system and all this. This is something very illogical. You may write, you may get few points to write, no doubt. But that relevance of those points will not be there as far as the contemporary nature of questions are coming. Fine. Model police law and all this. So see, when you are thinking of police reform now, think of the broader spectrum like law and order, justice. And law and order becoming a contentious issue between center and state. How? You see, most of the states are converting their districts into a commissionerate system. When they are converting it to commissionerate system, no doubt, the powers of the IPS probably supersedes, not supersede, at least becomes parallel to the IAS, that is the district collector, district magistrate, who are supposed to be the head of the law and order. Likewise, what they are doing, they are bifurcating, they are somewhere restricting the power of the IAS. IAS being a multi-functional role, okay, generally as the agent of the central government as well as the kingpin of the state government. Right? But they are dividing this power which was technically centralized under IAS. Also, law and order is emerging something with irreparable, relationship, because the nature of state-center interaction, nature of state-state interaction. Okay, think about CBI and the Mumbai police relationship or issue that emerged, right? Or, for example, for that matter, Kerala and central government issue, right? And likewise, and so many other, let's say UP government and UP police and the adjoining police, state police, their relationship, how it is emerging, right? So there are numerous examples in which we can think of that. See, the nature of the center-state relation, the polity basically controls the issue of law and order. So theoretically it is under the state government, but as you know, we are a parliamentary system, right? And we are a parliamentary democracy, and technically the central government may have a dominant role if the same party is in power in both the places. So the issue of police reform becomes futile, it becomes useless until and unless the state government actually enjoys autonomy with respect to the center, or center does not enjoy a dominant position with respect to the state. The role of the central agencies again, they have impact on the center-state relationship. Right? So CBI, or for that matter IB, or for that matter other investigative agencies at the central level, right? ED or DRI, and likewise there are so many institutions and agencies, okay, which have a very dominant, prominent role in some way tightening the screw of the state governments. Right. So there are numerous ways by which you can tackle. Obviously, the internal police reforms as a structure, as an organization, right? As a rule, IPC changes, CRPC changes, then Indian Police Act changes, Evidence Act changes. There are a lot of changes required, especially in the era of cyber governance, in the era of emergence of forensic sciences and all that, jail reforms, justice delivery, so many things. But you cannot just simply read this, okay, without keeping in mind this aspect, right? Obviously, local governments do not have police. Local governments are dependent for the law and order function on the state. That itself erodes their autonomy, right? So we have to understand in that broader perspective, right? Many questions revolve around this idea, whether they come directly in the form of corruption, how to tackle corruption, or they come in the form of performance appraisal systems or public service motivation, okay, or they come in the form of the changes to the training models, the changes to the overall civil services system, and likewise. But see, the implied nature of those questions, if you go and see the question paper, go back and see them, the implied nature of those questions is majorly the ethics in governance. So how we need to change the overall system internally or externally, how we need to employ various tools of modifying, amending, or changing, reforming the system ultimately to get the outcome, right? The overall result of this. And definitely this is a very broad term which may not just entail or imbibe the internal changes in the civil services, whether in terms of training, in terms of performance appraisal, in terms of use of various 360-degree, 180-degree evaluation parameters as conceived by second ARC, or at least supported by second ARC, or use of Sparrow, right? And whatever that has come, fine. But its broader spectrum would involve a dominant role of media, civil society, and all those things. So your paper one knowledge will also come there, that you have studied in accountability and control and so many other places. NPM, like second ARC, has extensively dealt with the use of NPM, reinventing government, and technology as the three major, you can say, post-good governance tools, post-globalization tools, as the three major post-globalization tools which will deal with the ethics in governance issue. So Douglas Committee, Nolan Committee, Franks Committee, or whatever committee we talk about, right? Birla Committee and likewise. So you have to understand now that nature of questions that are asked will be around this theme. So it's important to understand the theme, the underlying principle of the question, rather than getting baffled by the question that why this has been asked, why net neutrality has been asked, right? Why technology or some specific technical development has been asked. The focus is not on knowing the technical features of that. The focus is on that, okay, what are the sound parameters of governance reforms which will be achieved by these changes. Likewise, local governance. Now, many questions that you'll find will be about DPC, will be about local level planning, block level planning, and what drastic reforms can be brought here. Like we have a Kerala model guidelines are there, right? So plan guidelines at the local level, at the lowest level, which is basically used in Kerala. Right? So there are around 7-8 parameters which they have highlighted, which majorly must be used across different states, which we are not doing. Right. Now this gives you a lot of data to be used. Right? So you can definitely write extraordinary answers, not just by knowing theoretically or theoretical things here. So people say, okay, how do we use theories here? Okay. These are very subtle uses. These are very, seamless, unhindered, unrestricted use. We don't have to force that use. For example, when you talk about local governance. So scholars from 𝗪𝗯 to Gulick and Erwig to Fowler, even to probably a large extent people like later scholars like who have talked about public policy, they have all talked about, okay, how we need to decentralize the power. Fine. Fessler's classification, there are a lot of other scholars who have dealt with this idea. Right. So you can use theoretically them, right? If you are talking about neo-localism, the ideas of neo-localism, fine, and there are comparative case studies throughout the world, whether you take Kenya, right, Nairobi, or what is that, many African countries, Sudan, then if you go to Latin American countries, right, Nordic countries, many Western Europe countries are experimenting with it, right? So you can give lot of comparative examples, comparative case studies. Even second ARC has provided that, right? So when you are dealing with this local governance, it's not just you need to know 73rd and 74th Amendment Act and 243 and all those articles, because that will be more or less an input, but that will not be an answer, right? You may also need to have a lot of case studies and data and facts. Right. So if you create a balanced approach, you can score very well. The problem is that you want to deal with the every topic in a piecemeal manner. You want some, what is corruption? What does corruption mean? What is the act of corruption? Obviously, these are important things. This needs to be studied. They are static part, right? But they are more used as a means. They are not the end of the answer. Fine. So we are going to deal with that. Now, nature of content is also a very important aspect. Nature of content means how we are going to classify the content which we are going to study. So classifying the content would be in the form of, let's say, a static content, a concept, which is very important, right? Let's say the static content, like I said, is 73rd, 74th Amendment and the features of that, or the provisions related to the inclusion of women, or SC and ST, right? Now, obviously this may be the provisions which we may need to remember. But concept is what? The concept pertains to that whether such procedures or such principles of inclusion, right, have they actually impacted the patriarchal nature of society? And it's not just patriarchal society, it is patriarchal politics as well. So have they been able to impact it? What fundamental change will they bring at the Gram Sabha level, at the village level, at the village administration level, right? At the, probably you can say, the planning mechanism at the district level or sub-district level. How this fundamentally is going to alter the nature of a relationship between the genders. Supported by various government schemes. So how they are going to influence each other constructively, that is the idea. So that is the concept part. Then, so we have a fact, we have static portion, we have a concept portion, and then we have an application portion. Then we'll have to we need to have some data, we need to have some case studies, we need to have some illustrations to understand and visualize what this relationship looks like as of now. What would be its probably trend or its position or status maybe after a few years, and how we can predict that. We can obviously predict that on the basis of the trend which is there for the past 20 years, right? Or we can do a comparative region-wise analysis. Southern India, we can break states like Kerala, which have more proactive politics, and states like Andhra or Telangana, where some fundamental drastic developmental changes have been brought, right? So, and likewise, right? So we can use a lot of application here and convey our idea. Then the fourth aspect would be, like we had static, concept, application. The fourth aspect would be obviously to bring the contemporary relevance. Any policy, any reform, any law, any recent event which has happened, right, which makes our content, more relevant to the contemporary analysis. So what we'll do that. We need to have a structure like that. Then ultimately we need to have a conclusion or a way forward. Or I would say a descriptive, analytical, optimistic conclusion. Right? A descriptive, analytical, optimistic conclusion. Right? We cannot deny that these changes have been very important, very relevant. Descriptive, obviously we cannot simply write a line and say, okay, the future holds good for this development, or the future we may see the impact of such development. No. We have to have a very logical correlation that whatever we have discussed, in reality, what would be specific consequences of these changes. So it has to be descriptive, analytical, and optimistic conclusion. Optimistic in the sense that obviously we are talking about course correction, we are talking about reform. We have not just highlighted the negatives or the critical aspects of a particular topic just for the sake of criticism. We are a problem solver. We are an administrator. We intend to be a bureaucrat. So we are not just writing it. We have sensibly understood it and we are suggesting a solution for that, right? So this would be all for the Conceptor program, right? Starting from 14 July, obviously there is offline, online, both the batches. So you can join. Those people who are quite confident of mains, obviously the results are out, so they can definitely come and discuss with this about the program. Roughly 1.5 months, 2.5 hours, 3 hours of class. We'll discuss a lot of questions here also. We'll try to frame answers to that. We'll give you some worksheets which will have questions and answer. We'll try to predict the various ways and the various formats in which a particular topic can be asked, right? We'll try to have comprehensive coverage, like you say, the current perspectives. We'll do that. Though we may not say totally it's current affairs, but it's current perspectives of governance which are more relevant for us. Fine. Let's say the PSU we talk about, PSU becomes a very important area, right? But the nature of question that is asked in PSU would be more in the nature of the reforms which the government is taking today. Right? And is your lateral entry one of the manifestations of this privatization? Right? Is the 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗀𝗀 or 𝗪𝗵𝗁𝗃 one of the manifestations of this? Privatizing the defense as well? Will it bring some fundamental changes to the structure of society? Will it lead to militarization of society? So we have to, understand or think beyond that book, think beyond that restricted Arora and Goel or Fadia and Fadia, or even I would say second 𝗪𝗧. Second 𝗪𝗧 gives a lot of good perspectives. At least it gives a lot of good points to write in the answer. Sensible and logical points, which can fetch us more marks, right? So if you think that mugging your syllabus and knowing those specific facts will be enough for me to write the answer, that is not at all the need of the day today. Facts will be the input to your answer, no doubt about it. But will that be answer? Accumulation or segregation of facts at one place will be the answer? It will not be the answer, right? So we would help you. We like to, exchange the wisdom, the intelligence, probably the experience that we have acquired. And obviously our purpose is also that you start scoring well, increase your score. If there are some, elementary changes, not very fundamental structural changes required in your preparation, that can be done through this program. Conceptual problems if you have, right? Theoretical issues if you have, if you're not able to distinguish between NPM and NPA, if you're not able to understand the e-governance and NPM relationship, if somewhere there is a problem with you pertaining to the linkage within the paper 1, within the paper 2, between paper 1, between paper 2. So obviously a lot of brainstorming will be done here and qualitative content will be delivered to you, right? Even handwritten answers will be given to you. So we'll put that effort. And like I said, the purpose is obviously purely that you score well. Fine. But I have no doubt if you really work hard, if you really do and follow the prescriptions, probably you'll end up scoring good marks. Fine. The fundamental problem is that you try to, amass information, but you are not able to disseminate or, categorize that information, present that information into an answer. That is the biggest issue. Right. So see you then. All the best. This was all about the program. Just a brief or sneak preview, I would say, of the program. Rest you can obviously talk to us and find out. Thank you so much. All the best to you.